Dave Talks Comics, Episode 21. Dave Talks Comics is a collection of my thoughts, memories, and musings on comics I have read. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com. On Twitter at Dave Talks Comics. Email can be sent to dave@davetalkscomics.com. Usually I'm talking about comics on these shows, but this is part 2 of my summary, my roundup of the Appleseed Comic-Con, which was on May 17th and 18th, 2014, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. On this episode, this segment, I will be talking about the first day of the con. I'll be talking about things I saw, people I talked to, the panel I went to, books I bought, art I bought, all kinds of stuff along those lines, and then a little bit about the evening, the place I had dinner, and I recorded all this that evening on May 17th. In the evening, after I'd had dinner, when everything was still fresh in my mind. Appleseed Comic-Con. It is Saturday morning, day 1 of Appleseed Comic-Con. I'm at the hotel. I'm getting ready to take off to go down to the Grand Wayne Convention Center, which is a few miles from here, and go to the show. I think the show opens in about an hour. I'm not sure what kind of a line there's going to be. I've already got my ticket. I have one commission lined up already. Don't know if it's finished or not. And other than that, I'll be looking for comic books. There's a couple panels I want to go to. And looking for comic books, looking maybe buy another commission or two. I'm kind of undecided as to whether I'm going to stay for day 2 or not. I'm certainly going to stay overnight. I'm just not sure if I'm going to leave tomorrow morning to head home, considering it's probably going to take me about 12 hours to get home. Because the show doesn't open until 11 on Sunday. And I want to be out of here by 2, and there's really no panels that I want to go to tomorrow morning, at least none that have been announced. So I'm not sure if I'll have a reason really to stick around. So kind of plan to wait and see on that. Kind of wait and see on that. So I'll check back later, maybe at the end of the day, maybe earlier, to recap how things have gone. Appleseed Comic-Con Day 1. I started the day with breakfast. I decided not to go out for breakfast. I had breakfast at the hotel, just bagels, and although it tasted more like rolls with holes than bagels, but anyway, they were filling. I left a little after 9 o'clock. Show didn't open until 10. I left a little after 9 o'clock, got downtown, and drove around a little bit looking for a parking garage. I had a map of the parking garages, but the ones I found seemed to be closed. Anyway, I ended up parking on the street near the public library, and it said you didn't have to pay on the weekends, but it said there was a 2-hour limit. So I took my chances and parked there anyway, and I was fine. I got to the show a little early. I picked up my wristband and then hung out for a little while until the show opened at 10 o'clock. When I went in, the first thing I did was I made a beeline for the boxes of trade paperbacks. And there was one vendor called, see if I can find the name. I can't remember. Something like Crazy Trades or something like that. But I went through their boxes, and they had, I don't know, 40 or 50, well, maybe not quite that many, but there was a lot of boxes of trades that they had there. And a lot of DC, a lot of Marvel, a lot of independent stuff. I ended up picking out 5 trades. I tried to talk myself into putting at least a couple of them back, but ultimately I was unsuccessful in that venture, and I bought them all. I got Batman: A Death in the Family. This is from the 1980s. This is the story in which, spoiler alert, Jason Todd was killed by the Joker, which I've never read, which is why I bought it. And this was one of the old printings of it, it looks like. Let's see, the next thing I picked out was Battlefields, Volume 4, Happy Valley. This is Garth Ennis's, this is another book in Garth Ennis's series about, I think they're all set during World War II, and they're combat stories during World War II. And this one has to do with a plane, a bomber, and I think a particular character. I think it's a bomber. Yeah, well, that's what they're picturing on the front, is a bomber. So it must be. The third thing I picked out was Challenges of the Unknown by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. I have kind of a spotty history with their stuff. Well, I'd say negative history with their stuff. I've read, 3 things I think that they wrote, or maybe 2. I've read Batman: The Long Halloween, and I liked the art, but I wasn't crazy about the story. And I've read Catwoman: When in Rome, which really didn't do a hell of a lot for me. And that may be the only other thing I've read by them. I haven't read any of their Marvel books, I know. I have read some other stuff that Tim Sale has done, but I don't think I've read anything else by the pair of them. Anyway, this one is one. I mean, the Challenge of the Unknown are a group that I like, and one of these days I'm going to read their Silver Age stories. In fact, they had the Silver Age DC archives there, but I think I can get them for a little less money online, so I decided to pass. So I picked up that, and then finally the 5th book was Joe Kubert Presents, and this was, I think, the last thing that Joe Kubert did that was published, and this is like a collection. I think it was 6 issues long, and it was just it was kind of an anthology series, and I think he did some of them himself, and some of them he collaborated with other creators, and I'm a big fan of Joe Kubert's artwork, and so I had to. This was too good, and it was cover price was only $20, and these were half off, so it was $10, and it's a big, thick, meaty book. I mean, it's over 300 pages, just over 300 pages. So I had to buy this. So those are the 5 trades I got, and I spent probably an hour going through those boxes before I finally said, okay, enough's enough, and settled up with the guy whose business it was and moved on. So that was probably 11 o'clock by the time I got done doing all that. Then I wandered the tables for a while going through, and there was like 3 aisles with tables on each side of the aisle, so I guess 6 rows of tables. And the room wasn't enormous, but it was big enough, and the aisles were wide enough that you weren't really falling all over each other. I mean, sometimes there'd be, a momentary cluster, but for the most part, it wasn't bad at all. I mean, it was very nice. Did I forget to say that I bought Exterminators Volume 3? The Lies of Our Fathers? I think I did. Okay, that was the 5th trade, or the 4th or the 3rd trade that I picked up. I'm just looking at it right now, and I can't remember saying that. Anyway, so I wandered the table. I saw some things that were really nice. There's some things that didn't do anything for me, and there were some things that were nice, and I was just, you feel that pressure to spend money, to buy, and it's, you kind of, I don't know, my feeling is you kind of have to find your rhythm, because if you just go in and start throwing money, you're going to end up buying a bunch of stuff that you don't want, or maybe you'll get a lot of stuff that you want, but you're just going to spend way more than you should, or spend all your money early and then not have anything left for later on. So I held back as much as I could, although I saw some things that I liked, and there's a few of them that I went back and I picked up later on. And I'll get to that. But so I was looking for a particular artist because before the show I had ordered a commission from an artist who I'd seen a tweet from him about this, and so I contacted him via email, and his name is Jim Toe, and he did I asked him to do a commission for me of the Jack of Hearts. And so I came across his table and I told him, I introduced myself, and he did a beautiful job with this Jack of Hearts. I liked the work that I'd seen online. I mean, obviously, if I'm going to order a commission from somebody, I'm going to check out their past work to see what they've done. And I liked what I saw. And so this is my second piece of the Jack of Hearts, and the other one being by Mike Myhack, which is another piece that I really like. But he did a really nice job with this. He made it kind of look like it's a portrait, but he kind of made it look like a playing card. And I will post a picture online. Let's see, what else? So then I started to buy some other stuff. Let's see, let me look through these books like I've got here. Well, there was one table I stopped at. As I go through these, as I go to cons, and I do a few of them each year, is what I mean. You see a lot of people selling stuff, and quite often, there's all sorts of things you notice about the people these are going to people selling stuff. I'm talking about creators, people who have either the writers or the artists, or maybe they're both the writer and the artist of a book. So, I see all kinds of problems, and I see all kinds of positives, There are people who take the time to engage you. There are people who try to sell too hard to you. There are people who don't try to engage you at all. And usually I will stop in front of somebody's table, and sometimes people will look up and say hi. I don't always initiate eye contact. I don't always look at them. Sometimes I will look at what's on their table, and sometimes they will say something, and sometimes they won't. And sometimes they'll have something nice, and it just will... I like it, but it's just what they're asking for it is just way too much. Like they've got a stapled... 20-page comic book, and they want $5 for it or something like that. That's printed on basically, copier paper or something like that. Anyway, one of the first things I did buy is a comic book, and this is the first, this is new, it says number 1, May 2014, and it's called Seekers of Tomorrow, and it is written and drawn by Michael Fraley. And it's kind of got a sci-fi element to it, as you would imagine, with a title like that. And, there's a text piece in the back. And it's not terribly long. And it is one of these cases where it looks like 8.5 by 11 paper. It's printed on and just folded in half and stapled see, single staple? Yeah, just a single staple. The cover is in color. The interiors are in black and white. The back is also in color. And he was just asking $1.50 for it. And I didn't think that was too extreme, and I'm kind of intrigued by it. I haven't read it yet. So I picked it up. I said, sure, I'll take it. So we'll see how that is. But anyway, I could see other people trying to sell me that for like $3 or $4. And out of a clear blue sky, or out of coming to be cold, like, I don't think I would probably go for that. Let's see. The next thing I picked up, and I'm not sure if I'm strictly doing these in order. I stopped by the Banthology table, or not Banthology. That's one of their books, the Kingbone Press table, and I picked up Pax of the Low Country #1. And this is a new comic book. They debuted it at Appleseed Comic-Con. And it kind of has a sci-fi element to it. I had seen their ads. I had seen tweets about it. So I was looking for this. They told me it is the first part. It's going to be a 6-issue series. I think issues 2 and 3, they said, are going to be out by the end of the summer, or later this year at least. And they're going to try and shop it around to some publishers and see if they can get it, because this is self-published, with the typical kablam.com on the back. Excuse me. So it's kind of futuristic. Looks interesting. It's in color. The writer is John Dudley. The artist is Don Cardenas. Colors by Kelly Fitzpatrick. I talked to both John Dudley and Don Cardenas, were both there. And so this looks like a good pickup to me. It was $3. And it looks interesting. I was willing to invest the $3. I thought it was a good idea. Let's see, about then... Actually, the next thing I did, I think, was so I got sales pitches from a number of people. There was some who I thought were questionable. There was one case where I felt like the guy just kept on trying to pitch stuff to me, and maybe eventually I walked away. I said thank you, and I moved on. I think he was a little disappointed. His premise of his story sounded a little interesting, but I was not too impressed by the art. And he was asking for $3 a book for a black and white comic. I can't remember the quality of the printing on it. I think this was another one that was printed by Kablam. So I decided not to buy it. If he'd been offering me, like, say, 2 issues for $3 or something like that, or, $2 an issue, 2 for $3, all 3 for $5 or something like that, I might have bought some, but at $3 an issue, it just seemed a little too much. Down towards the end of that row, I stopped and I talked to Andy Jewett for a while. Andy had done, I think, just one commission for me a few years ago. And we're friends on Facebook, and we talked a while about stuff, about... He was telling me about how he hasn't been doing as much as he wants to in the art field, and how he's trying to get back into it. And he was only going to be there for today. So I'm glad we got a chance to talk. And so I'm not sure exactly how long I was there, but I was probably there for a while. I mean, a good 20 minutes or more, as we talked about stuff, about 11 o'clock comics, I guess, and Comic-Cons and Super Show, and of course, Appleseed, and that kind of stuff, yeah. So I think after that was when, I think by then it was about 2 hours had passed, and I went to the panel that was at 1 o'clock, which was Ed Piskor's panel, which was mostly about his book. The book it's starting as a webcomic, but then he started to collect it now. It's being printed by Fantagraphic Books, and that's the Hip Hop Family Tree, or Hip Hop Family Tree. And so it was an hour-long him talking about the evolution of hip-hop and his interest in hip-hop. And there was a lot of talk about graffiti and how the artists tended to create or have people create images of them, picturing them as like superheroes, or not necessarily just superheroes, but as supernatural. And he was more interested in getting the actual stories, and that was part of the reason what interested him in putting this all together. Or at least that's what I took from the presentation, as far as what got him motivated to do this. And he even got into, because the book has a very old school feel to it. And, he talked about things like the influences of people like Jack Kirby on graffiti art, Jack Kirby and Vaughn Baudet, and comic books from the 70s and the 80s. And one of the most interesting things I thought was how he talked about how he developed the color palette that he used in this book, how he took samples from old comic books and, old, sometimes beat up comic books, so he would scan if I understood correctly, he would scan the pages. He would scan like a sample to get, okay, here's a black, or here's a red, or here's a blue, here's a light blue, here's a dark blue. And he developed his whole palette, and that's what he used then to color Hip Hop Family Tree. And I thought that was kind of neat. And actually, that takes me back to something else, sidebar here. When I was going through the tables early on, I noticed that there was, I was going through somebody's book, and normally when you go through these books of original art, the pages are penciled and inked, or maybe just penciled, but you almost never see pages that are colored, unless it's like a commission or something, or it's a commission or something. But there was a guy, and I really need to go back to his table tomorrow if I've got the time, and he had pages that were colored, and I was fascinated by it, and I asked him, and he said he had hand-painted them with watercolors. And so he was actually, I didn't ask him too many questions about it, but I thought it was fascinating because it was beautifully done. And I'll have to get the name of that comic book, because it was for a comic book, and I think they had a collection out of the first 5 issues, I think, or something like that. But getting back to Ed Piskor and Hip Hop Family Tree, so he talked about his book. He showed us some pages from the book. There was one unfortunate part in the middle of the presentation when the computer decided to check for updates, and all of a sudden, because he was, he had a visual presentation, and all of a sudden the computer stopped working, and for about 5 minutes or more, he kept on talking, but he couldn't present anything while the computer was running updates, and eventually he was able to get back in and get everything back going. So that was it, and he had brought some copies of his free Comic Book Day comics, so I got a copy of that. I was thinking about buying the Hip Hop Family Tree. It's $25, the first collection. I think I at least want to read this trade. Oh, that's right. And this free Comic Book Day comic. And one of the things was he talked about how Fantagraphics is the company that's printing it. the impact of the Marvel Treasury editions on this book, and how he used the look of the font from the Marvel. And yeah, I mean, he even got down into things like fonts. He talked about the origin of the font that he uses for the title logo of Hip Hop Family Tree, and how the font for how the trade dress, I guess you'd say, I'm not sure, the look of the front of the collections. And I think he's already working on the second collection, or putting it together. I don't know if everything that's going to be in it has been published yet on Boing Boing, which is the website where it's printed. But they both have a look. They both look like the old Marvel Treasury-sized editions, which were those big editions, those big comic books. I'm not sure the exact dimensions, but much bigger than a regular comic book. I'd say bigger than 9 by 12 too. I'm not sure, maybe 11 by 14 or something like that. And they had cardboard covers, and so he showed us the impact of those, and how the different things that went into, and the different things that influenced his book. It wasn't so much about the actual content of the book as it was more the design and the style of the book and how it's put together. But it was a very interesting presentation. Afterwards, I went up to him and I talked to him for a couple minutes. I asked him about WYSIWYG, which I just read recently, and I hope to talk about that on a future episode. And I talked to him briefly about that until somebody else came up and needed to talk to him. And he also had another panel to do like 5 minutes later, so he didn't really have time to talk. But I think I got the information I wanted from him, and it was good to interact with him and to give him something back, I think. I hope I gave him something back that he for his efforts. And, I mean, I bought the book from him, the WYSIWYG, and I'll probably end up getting the Hip Hop Family Tree, just not just yet. And after that, he and Jim Rugg were going to interview Jim Steranko about, well, I'm not sure, his career, I guess. Now, I believe they taped that and audio, and I believe they're going to release that, I hope they are, as a episode of Tell Me Something I Don't Know. I think that's that's Jim Rugg's podcast. I think that's it. So I passed on that because I was guessing that they would be doing that. So it was 2:00 at that point. I went back to my car to make sure it was still there, because at that point it had been well over 4 hours since I'd left it, and it was supposed to be 2-hour parking, but it was free on the weekends. But anyway, car was still there, no problems. I went back to the convention center, and the place where I parked was like 3 blocks from the convention center. So I walked around some more. I ended up buying the next thing I bought. Oh, yes, the next thing I bought was, well, there was a couple things, actually. Before I went to the Ed Piscor panel, I stopped at Christopher Mitten's table, and I was looking through his art, and I really liked it, and he was offering to do sketches for $25, which seemed like a very reasonable price. And so I commissioned him. I don't know. I asked him to do a sketch for me of The Bride of Frankenstein. And I already have 2 sketches, one by Andy Kuhn and the other one by Spooky Chan, whose name, is that the name she goes by? It's Chandra Free, yes, Spooky Chan. And so I thought because he did a lot of horror stuff, The Bride of Frankenstein would be a good one for him to do. At first I was thinking something like The Phantom Stranger, and I don't know if that would have been any better. But anyway, he did a really cool sketch for me, or not, it's more than a sketch because it's there's a lot of ink in this. He obviously started with pencils and then went to inks. He told me he only needed 25 minutes or something like that, but I went to this panel, so I was gone for well over 25 minutes. And I thought about showing him the other two Bride of Frankenstein pieces I've got, but he was talking to somebody else, I think Mike Norton at the time, so I let that go. The next person I bought something from was a guy whose table was either right next to or a couple tables down from Christopher Mitten, and that was Ron Braun. And he'd done a few web comics, and he had all three of them collected in collected editions. Two of them were $10, one of them was $15. I ended up buying the one. We talked for a little bit. He was giving me a sales pitch. I thought he did a pretty good job of talking about it without trying to sell me too hard on it. And I ended up buying one called Hello Cruel World, which, let's see, is there a sales pitch on the back of this? No, there isn't. But it says, "Who knew real life could be so scary?" And it's got supernatural elements in it. So I flipped through it. I flipped through all three of the books, but this one appealed to me, I think, the most. The other two were more real-world stuff, I think. And this one also kind of has a preview of a new thing that he's working on about a platypus. Let's see. Dark Wagged Platypus for Hire. Yeah. And along with the comic, with the trade, the collection, which cost $10, he threw in a print of the platypus, and he had a bunch of prints there. And this one that he gave me, the platypus is dressed as Deadpool. Yes, Deadpool. And he signed both the print and the book. Let's see, anything else? Let's see. Then I got. I stopped by Dave Wachter's table, and he's done a few pieces for me over the years. It's been a year now since he'd done a piece for me, and I wasn't planning on getting. I mean, I was kind of interested in getting something from him, another commission, but I don't really have the time because I'm not sure what time I'm going to be leaving tomorrow. So I just I wasn't going to get anything, but I stood there and talked with him for a good 15 minutes, I'd say. And then I noticed he had a book there, and it wasn't just a sketchbook. I'm not big on sketchbooks. I want a story, and sketchbooks don't usually give you a story. But he drew a story, which he didn't write it, but he drew it, and I flipped through it, and it looks great. And it's called Breath of Bones, and it looks like it's set during World War II, and it has to do with a golem. And the packaging is beautiful. It's a hardback, and all he was asking, its cover price is only $15 or $14.95, and he even did a sketch in it for me. He did a sketch of the golem inside, on the inside cover of the book. So I thought I should. I mean, it appealed to me. The story appealed to me. The art appealed to me. Or I should say, the subject matter. I haven't read the story yet, but the subject matter appeals to me, and the art appeals to me, and so I went ahead and I got it. Let's see what else. Just a couple more things. I got. Where is that? What is that? No, that's not it. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so I went back to the Kingbone Press table and I talked to those guys some more. I talked to John Dudley and I talked to John Westhoff, who wasn't there the first time I stopped by, and I talked to the O'Brien brothers, John and, I'm forgetting his last name. I'll have to, wait a minute. I think I have a program somewhere around here that should have their names. I feel bad for forgetting. Here it is. Let's see. It is, they were in row B. John and Timothy O'Brien. Okay. I talked to them about like Comic-Cons because they're from North Carolina and they go to Heroes Con and possibly some other Comic-Cons down there. Probably they do. So we talked about those and we talked about podcasts and stuff like that. And I ended up buying the Banthology 2 and 3. These are two trades. These were things that were related to the 11 O'Clock Comics Forum in that most of the creators were people on the 11 O'Clock Comics Forum, which I am a member of. I post under the name Kilmarrock. And both of these are anthologies, so they're just collections of stories. There is no theme to them. And they were selling them, I think one was 10 and one was 7, but they were selling both. If you want to buy both, it was $15. So I bought both. And the first one's probably 150 pages. And the second one, 130, about 140 pages it looks like. And the second one I think is well over 200 pages. Let's see, is there a page counter? No, I don't see it. But I figured why not? I know some of these guys, and I'm always curious to see what people are doing, and they seem like nice people. And I've read some of their other stuff. I supported their Bulletproof Chicken campaign, which was also Kingbone Press. And I talked about Bulletproof Chicken on an earlier episode of Dave Talks Comics. It was in the first 10 episodes, I believe. 6 or 7 or something like that. And then they also threw in a copy of Banthology 2, which is just a single issue. Another music anthology. Let's see. So, is that it? No, that's not it. There's one more thing. And that is Little Guardians. And Little Guardians is a story, it looks like of a couple kids learning to... Little Guardians is a story of two young people switched at birth and now unknowingly living each other's lives. And it goes on from there. And the creators are Lee Chirolis, I think that's how it's pronounced, I'm not certain, and Ed Cho. And the cover looked nice, but there's a lot of books where the cover looks nice. And so I opened it up and I started flipping through it, and I thought it looked pretty darn good. I like the artwork, I like the shading, I like the facial expressions, I like the lettering, and the story concept sounded interesting. And the guys who were presenting it to me did a good job presenting it, and they seemed nice, and so I figured, why not? And the first time I went past and I saw it, I was like, wow, this is really nice, but I don't want to commit to anything right now. And they had the first 2 volumes available. I think each volume is a few chapters. But I decided I didn't want to buy both. So I just bought the first book, and I paid a little extra, an extra $5. The artist, Lee Chirolis, also drew a sketch in the book for me. So that was about it. I guess that's about it as far as stuff I bought. I also spent a while talking to Jerry McDade, who does the Great Expectations podcast, with somebody else who wasn't at Appleseed Comic-Con today. And we talked a lot about X-Men because that's what the Great Expectations podcast is all about. And podcasting and stuff like that. And I met Cam Smalley while I was there. And did I meet anybody else? I feel like I'm probably forgetting somebody. Well, the only other person that I should mention who I ran into, who I stopped to talk to, is the guy who organizes the event, and that's Zach Crucy. And he was the last person I talked to, because after I talked to Zach, I took off for the day. But I talked to Zach, and we spoke for about 5-10 minutes, something like that, just about, he was, I guess he wanted to acknowledge the fact, because I told a few people this, that I had come out from, DC, which is about a 600-mile drive. And I wanted to, I think he wanted to make sure that I was enjoying myself and that I felt like it was worth my time, and I do. I had fun. I'm not going to say the drive is 100% enjoyable, but, and the last part of the drive, the end of the drive last night, I was really dragging, but I'm glad I came. I found some neat stuff like Little Guardians, although I found out as I talked to these guys that one of them actually has been going to SPX for the last couple of years, and I guess I could have picked it up there. But I don't think I would have seen all of the guys who from Kingbone Press at one of the East Coast cons like Baltimore or Heroes Con. I think that's about it. So around 5:30, the show closed down at 6, but around 5:15, 5:30, I took off. I drove back to the hotel, which is about 4 miles from the convention center. Took care of some stuff, and then I went out to dinner. I went to a Korean restaurant called Little Seoul, I think, something like that, it was about a mile from the hotel, which was very good. I stuffed myself. I had mandu, which are like dumplings stuffed with beef and something else, I think. And then I had, and then I had bibimbap, which is a Korean dish, which had rice and vegetables, and in this case, squid. And it was a little spicy, not super spicy. It was a little spicy, and it also came with a cup of soup. And of course, this being a Korean place, you'd have all these pickled dishes, and they only brought out 5. I've been to one Korean restaurant when I went to San Francisco where they brought out a whole tray full of stuff just for me, and there was no way I could finish it all. But they only brought out 5 little plates of these pickled dishes, and so I finished off everything, but I was stuffed beyond belief by the time I was done with it. Oh, and my fortune, because it's a Korean Chinese place, I guess they sell both, is the mysterious side of your nature makes you most alluring. Okay, and the fortune cookie was stale, and it had already been broken in half, even though it was still in the package. So I don't know if I should probably take this fortune with a grain of salt. Let's see, my lucky numbers are 9, 56, 17, 15, 64, and 22. I'm not making anything out of that. Well, today is the 17th. There's that. No. And at the bottom it says, learn Chinese to teach Jiaoshu. And I'm guessing on the pronunciation there. Not certain that's how it's pronounced. Anyway, that was day 1 of Appleseed Comic-Con for me. I hope, well, day 2 is going to be shorter. I need to take off, go back to DC, and it's probably going to take me at least 12 hours to make that drive. So I can't stay until 5 o'clock tomorrow. And I spent money with that in mind today. I'm probably not going to spend much tomorrow. I spent, about $200 today, something like that. But there is a panel. The John and Timothy O'Brien have a panel that I want to go to tomorrow. And I might buy one or two of those other things that I did not buy today that caught my eye yesterday, original things. I did look through some comic boxes looking for comics that I want. There wasn't a huge amount of back issues there, but I wasn't able to find any of the things that I was looking for. There were some other things that kind of caught my eye, but nothing that, you got to be selective with this stuff. Nothing that really made me say, I've got to have that, So, for the most part, I think I'm done with my shopping. Day 1 is over. I'm trying to get a good night's sleep. The con doesn't open until 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, so I might sleep in a little bit. I might go get breakfast downstairs, then come back upstairs and sleep in some more, so that I'm well rested for the drive back. Hoping to be leaving around, 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, something like that. So, for the umpteenth time, that's it for day 1 of Appleseed Comic-Con. That's it for episode 21 of Dave Talks Comics. Questions or comments can be posted on the episode page at davetalkscomics.com or tweet them to Dave Talks Comics. Email your questions or comments to dave@davetalkscomics.com. Next episode will be a quick roundup of day 2. I didn't spend as much time at the show on day 2, and so the summary is considerably shorter than the one for day 1. And then the rest of the episode will be my trip back to DC.